He stood up in the middle of a wedding reception, walked past every laughing woman, every easy smile, every open invitation, and pulled out a chair next to the one woman in the room who looked like she was trying to disappear. Nobody expected that. She didn't expect that. And what she whispered to him on that dance floor, 4 quiet words that stopped him cold, is the reason this story is going to stay with you long after it's over. Drop your city in the comments right now. Let me see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. You do not want to miss what comes next. The alarm went off at 4:47 in the morning, not 4:45, not 5 o'clock. Exactly 4:47, because that was the time Nathan Cole had set it 6 years ago when he was stationed in Norfolk, and he had never changed it. Not once. Not even after everything that happened. Not even after the world he'd built with 2 people in it became a world he navigated with 1. He was already awake. He was always already awake. Nathan lay flat on his back in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the way a man stares at something he stopped seeing a long time ago. The bedroom was quiet. The house was quiet. Outside Virginia Beach was doing what Virginia Beach always did at 4:47 in the morning. It was pretending the rest of the world didn't exist yet. He sat up, swung his legs to the floor, put his feet down, flat, the way they'd trained him. Weight-centered, spine straight, no hesitation between sleep and standing. The Navy didn't teach you to linger. It taught you to move. He moved. The kitchen smelled like coffee before the coffee finished brewing because Nathan had learned to set the timer the night before. Another habit. Another system. His life ran on systems the way a ship ran on fuel. Not because systems were beautiful, but because they worked. And working was the only thing that mattered when the alternative was standing still long enough to feel everything he'd spent 3 years learning not to feel. He poured the coffee. Black. No sugar. He stood at the kitchen counter, not at the table, never at the table because the table had 2 chairs, and sitting at it alone felt like a statement he wasn't ready to make, and he drank. From down the hall came the sound he waited for every morning without admitting he was waiting. A small door opening. Tiny feet on hardwood. Then the padding, shuffling sound of 6-year-old Lily Cole navigating the dark hallway by memory, which she could do because she'd been doing it since she was 4, and because she was in every measurable way her father's daughter. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair wild, one sock on the other missing, holding the stuffed rabbit she'd named Gerald, for reasons she'd never fully explained. She looked at him. He looked at her. "You're up early," he said. "You're always up early," she said. He handed her the small cup of warm milk he'd already poured, because the system included Lily had always included Lily would always include Lily, and she took it with both hands and climbed onto the counter stool like she owned the place, which she did. Entirely. "Today's the wedding," she said. "Yep." "You don't want to go." He looked at her over his coffee cup. 6 years old. 6. "What makes you say that?" She tilted her head the way she tilted her head when she was deciding how honest to be. "You made that face." "What face?" "The one you make when Sergeant Whitfield calls about extra drills." She scrunched her nose. "Like you ate something weird." Nathan said nothing for a moment. Then quietly he said, "I'm going." "I know," she said. "You always do the things you don't want to do." She said it simply without cruelty, the way children say true things like facts, not judgments. And he didn't argue with her because she was right, and they both knew it, and that was one of the things about Lily that undid him sometimes in ways he couldn't explain. She saw him. Completely. Without trying. He finished his coffee. She finished her warm milk. He rinsed both cups because the system included clean dishes before 5:15, and she climbed off the stool and padded back down the hallway to her room. Gerald tucked under her arm, already plotting whatever a 6-year-old plots at 5 in the morning. Nathan stood at the sink and looked out the small window above it. Dark sky. A few lights. The outline of the neighbor's oak tree against the faint beginning of blue. He thought about the wedding. He thought about weddings in general. What they meant, what they required of you emotionally, the way they forced you to sit inside joy that didn't belong to you and smile like it didn't cost anything. He thought about the last wedding he'd attended with Claire, and then the way he'd trained himself to do, He stopped thinking about Claire entirely. Not because she didn't deserve to be thought about. She deserved everything. But because thinking about Claire before a long day was the same as walking into a mission already compromised. It made you slow. It made you soft, and softness out here in the world, in the spaces between duties and systems, and the daily business of keeping a child alive and whole. Softness was a luxury he hadn't figured out how to afford yet. His name was Nathan Cole, Petty Officer First Class U.S. Navy Logistics Division 8 years in. He was 32 years old, which people at work kept telling him was young, and which he kept not believing. He was 6 feet and 1 inch tall. He had dark hair, he kept regulation short, even though he didn't have to anymore, and gray eyes that people sometimes said looked older than the rest of his face. He'd married Claire Weston when he was 26. She was 24. It was a Saturday in October, and he could still remember exactly how the light fell in the church in the late afternoon, warm and sideways, making everything look slightly gilded. He'd cried when he saw her at the end of the aisle, quietly controlled the way he did everything, but he'd cried. And she'd laughed when she saw him cry, a bright, completely unself-conscious laugh that rang through the whole church and made everyone else laugh too. That was Claire. She always laughed at the exact right moment. Lily was born 2 years later. And for a while, for what felt now like a very concentrated, very luminous stretch of time, Nathan Cole had 3 systems running simultaneously: the Navy, his marriage, and his daughter. And all 3 worked. All 3 ran clean and tight and efficient the way good systems do. Then one March afternoon, Claire drove home from picking up dry cleaning. She never arrived. A truck ran a red light at the intersection of Independence Boulevard and Kemps River Drive, and the world Nathan Cole had built over 6 careful years collapsed in the space of a phone call that lasted less than 4 minutes. He'd been on base. He remembered standing outside the equipment bay when the call came through on his cell, not military personnel, and he remembered picking up, and he remembered the voice, and he remembered the specific quality of the silence in his own chest that followed what the voice said. Like a vacuum, like something being removed. He didn't scream. He didn't drop the phone. He stood very still, and then he said, "I need to go." And he ended the call, and he told his supervisor he had a family emergency, and he drove to the hospital. He drove exactly the speed limit. Because the system said drive the speed limit. Because the system was still running, even when the man inside it had just shattered into 47 different pieces. 3 years. 3 years of systems. 3 years of 447 alarms and black coffee and Lily's warm milk and parent-teacher conferences and Saturday morning cartoons and Navy logistics reports and grocery lists organized by aisle and birthday parties he attended. With a smile that reached his eyes about 60% of the time, which he considered an acceptable rate of performance. He did not date. He did not try. He was not against it. Philosophically, he was just not ready, and he was honest enough with himself in the privacy of 4:47 in the morning to admit that he didn't know when ready would arrive, or whether it would announce itself, or whether he would simply one day realize it had been there for a while without him noticing. He went to work. He came home. He made dinner. He read to Lily. He sat on the balcony after she fell asleep, one chair, always just the one chair, and he watched the city move below and he breathed, and that was enough. That was the system. The system was enough. Until his colleague, Petty Officer, Second Class Ray Garza, loud, relentless, a man constitutionally incapable of not caring about the people around him, came to Nathan's office on a Tuesday afternoon and planted both hands on the desk and said, "I need you at my wedding, Cole." Nathan looked up from his logistics report. "Ray, don't," Ray said. "Don't do the thing where you look grateful and then say you'll think about it and then text me a week later with some excuse about Lily's school schedule." "I wasn't going to." "You absolutely were. I know your face." Ray pointed at him. "I have known your face for 4 years, man. I know every version of no you've ever made with that face." He straightened up. "I need you there. You're the closest thing I have to family in this city. Maria's family is flying in from everywhere, and all I've got on my side of the church is 3 guys from logistics who don't actually like me that much." He paused. "Please." Nathan looked at him for a long moment. The word "please" from Ray Garza was extremely rare. Ray Garza operated at a frequency of cheerful demands and enthusiastic expectations. Please from Ray meant it mattered. "What's the date?" Nathan said. Ray grinned. He had been ready for that question. Dog. Mrs. Patterson from next door agreed to watch Lily for the evening without being asked twice, because Mrs. Patterson had watched Lily many times, and the arrangement worked cleanly and efficiently, which was the only kind of arrangement Nathan maintained. He wore his charcoal suit, the one from the back of the closet. He'd worn it twice, once to a Navy formal event 18 months ago, and once before that to Claire's funeral. He'd almost bought a new one because of the second association, but that felt like a waste, and Nathan Cole did not waste things that still functioned. He drove to the venue, a banquet hall in Chesapeake, with more white flowers than he'd seen in one location since the last time he'd been in a Navy medical facility. He found his assigned seat, table 7, near the back, which Ray had placed him at either out of consideration or irony, and he couldn't decide which. He sat down. He straightened the napkin across his lap. He looked at the room. It was everything he'd expected, and none of it was comfortable. Music, laughter, the particular warm roar of 200 people collectively celebrating love. Couples on the dance floor, couples at tables, couples leaning into each other with the casual physical ease of people who had somewhere to put their hands, someone to orient toward. The bar was doing significant business. Children chased each other around the perimeter of the room. The photographer moved through it all like a benevolent ghost catching moments. Nathan watched it the way he watched everything, systematically, analytically, with the trained attention of a man who had spent years logging details, assessing movement, identifying patterns. The pattern here was simple. Everyone belonged. Everyone had a counterpart, a person, a reason to lean in close and smile like the world wasn't complicated. He ordered water from a passing server. He adjusted his tie. He checked his phone, no messages from Mrs. Patterson, which meant Lily was fine, which meant the one functioning piece of tonight's system was operating correctly. He set the phone face down on the table. He looked at the dance floor. He looked at the bar. He looked at the table to his left, occupied by an extended family unit he didn't know. He looked at the table to his right, and then he stopped looking at the room and looked at her. She was sitting alone. Not the way someone sits alone when their partner has stepped away temporarily, not checking her phone, not scanning the room for a returning face. She was sitting alone, the way someone sits alone, when alone is the full condition, not a temporary state. Posture, straight, hands folded on the table, looking at something in the middle distance that wasn't actually there. She was wearing a navy blue dress. He noticed the color first, probably because of the years, and her dark hair was pulled back in a way that looked like she'd spent effort making it look like she hadn't. She wasn't the most immediately striking woman in the room. The room had plenty of immediately striking women. She was something more specific than that. She was contained. That was the word. Like someone managing a great deal of internal weather without letting any of it reach the surface. Nathan recognized it because he did it himself. Every single day. He watched her for a few minutes. Nobody approached her table. She didn't look uncomfortable with that fact. She looked resolved to it the way a person looks resolved to the things they've already made peace with. A server passed her, and she smiled, brief, courteous, the functional smile, and then the smile ended, and she returned to the middle distance. Nathan set down his water glass. He thought about staying in his seat. He thought about the system, which did not include walking across a wedding reception toward a woman he didn't know for reasons he couldn't fully articulate. He thought about Ray Garza saying, "please," and what it meant to show up somewhere not just physically, but actually. And whether 8 years of Navy training that said, "assess then act" applied to things other than logistics. He stood up. He straightened his jacket. He crossed the room. Doubt. She noticed him coming. When he was about 6 feet away, he could see the small shift in her posture, the micro-adjustment of someone recalibrating who they expected to talk to tonight from no one to this person, apparently. She looked up. Her eyes were brown and direct, and the look she gave him was not hostile, but it was honest. "Who are you, and why are you at my table?" which he respected immediately. "Hi," he said. He pulled out the chair across from her. "I'm Nathan. I'm at table 7. And I don't know a single person at table 7. She looked at him, then at table 7, then back at him. "That's not really my problem," she said. He paused, Then, despite himself, he almost smiled. "Fair point." A beat. "Avery Lane," she said. Not warmly, but not unkindly. Like someone who gives you their name because refusing is more effort than it's worth. "You know the bride or the groom?" he asked. "Maria." She paused. "We went to college together. I haven't seen her in 2 years." Another pause. "You?" "Ray. 4 years in logistics together." She considered this. "You're military." "Navy." He glanced at the dance floor, then back at her. "You look like you're enjoying this about as much as I am." Something shifted in her expression. Not a smile exactly, more like the beginning of one that she pulled back before it could finish. Was it that obvious? "Only to someone looking for the same exit," he said. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, surprisingly. More like two people testing whether a specific frequency of quiet was something they could share. "Why did you come?" she asked. He thought about the honest answer. "Because my friend asked, and he almost never asks." He looked at the dance floor. "You. Same reason, essentially." She glanced toward the head table where Maria was laughing at something her new husband had said. "I couldn't say no. She was good to me when I needed it." A beat. "I'm better at saying no now." "Good skill," he said. "I'm told." The band shifted to something slower. The crowd on the dance floor thinned, then rebuilt itself with different people couples who'd been waiting for exactly this tempo. The chandelier light shifted somehow warmer, more forgiving. Nathan looked at the dance floor. He looked at Avery Lane, who was also looking at the dance floor with the expression of someone watching something in a language they spoke but had stopped using. He said, and he would not be able to explain later, exactly what moved him to say it, only that it felt like the same kind of decision as moving toward the sound of a problem instead of away from it. "Do you want to dance?" She looked at him, not quickly, not immediately. She looked at him the way someone looks at something when they're deciding whether to trust it. "I'm not a good dancer," she said. "Neither am I," he said. "That's not reassuring." "It's honest?" Another beat. Then Avery Lane unfolded her hands from the table, pushed back her chair and stood up, and said simply quietly, "Okay." He offered his hand. She took it, and they walked onto the dance floor. Two people who hadn't planned on this, hadn't wanted this, hadn't come here looking for anything except an obligation fulfilled and an evening survived, and something in the room almost imperceptibly shifted. He wouldn't feel it until later. But she felt it the moment they started to move, because in a room full of couples who'd walked in together, everyone turned just slightly, just for a moment, to watch the man who had walked across the room alone past every easier option and chosen the one woman sitting by herself. And what happened next on that floor in that light in the space between two people who both thought they were too broken for this was the moment everything began to change. They were not graceful. That was the first thing, and maybe the only thing that needed to be said about how Nathan Cole and Avery Lane occupied that dance floor. He was too careful with his steps the way a man is careful when he's thinking about his feet instead of the music. She held herself slightly too upright, like someone who hadn't decided yet whether she was fully committed to the idea of being here in this moment with this particular stranger. They didn't fit together seamlessly. There was no movie-perfect synchronization, no effortless glide. There was his hand at her waist, placed there precisely professionally almost, and her hand on his shoulder, light as something that might leave without notice. There was a few inches of space between them that neither of them closed. But they moved, and that was something. The band was playing something old, a song Nathan half recognized, the kind of song that existed in the background of every formal occasion he'd ever attended. Soft enough to talk over, slow enough that you didn't need to know what you were doing. The floor around them had 6 or 7 other couples, all of them absorbed in each other, none of them paying attention to the two people at the edge who were navigating this with all the elegance of a first day on a new assignment. Avery was looking slightly past his shoulder. He was doing the same thing, looking just to the side of her face at the middle distance, at nothing in particular. Two people standing close together, both of them staring politely away. Then she said, "You counted." He stopped almost counting. What? Your steps. You were counting in your head. She said it without judgment, more like an observation she couldn't quite help making. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I wasn't. He stopped, reconsidered. A little. It's fine, she said. And then a beat later, quieter. I was doing it too. He looked at her then. Actually at her, not the middle distance. And she was already looking at him, caught herself doing it actually in the way someone gets caught being more present than they intended to be. Neither of them looked away. You come to a lot of these, he asked. Weddings. She made a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but was adjacent to one. Too many. Everyone I know is at that age. Getting married, having kids. She glanced toward the head table. Being happy. He noticed the way she said that last part. Not bitter, something more layered than bitter. Like happy was a country she'd visited once and left her passport behind in. You make it sound like a disease, he said. Not a disease. She thought about it. More like something that happens to other people. Reliably. A pause. You know that feeling. He did. He knew it very specifically. But he said, I'm not sure yet, because it felt more honest than yes, and less deflective than nothing. She seemed to accept that. They moved through another half-turn. He stopped counting. Ray said you're in logistics, she said. 8 years. That's a long time. It goes fast when you have structure, he said. And then because something about the way she was listening made him want to be more accurate than that, and slow when you don't. She was quiet for a moment. When did you lose the structure? He hadn't said anything about losing structure. He'd just said it goes slow when you don't have it. The fact that she'd heard the underneath of that sentence, heard it and moved toward it instead of away, made him blink once carefully, the way you blink when something lands in a place you weren't expecting contact. 3 years ago, he said. What happened? He looked at her, checked something in himself. Some internal gauge he'd built up over 3 years of people asking variations of this question, most of whom he answered with personal loss and a tone that closed the door. The gauge checked out. He didn't know why, but it checked out. My wife died, he said. Car accident. I was on base. She was... He stopped, chose different words. She was just running an errand. Avery stopped moving for just a fraction of a second. A stillness so brief it might not have registered to anyone watching. But he was trained to notice small things, and he noticed it. I'm sorry, she said. And she said it the way people say it when they mean it, rather than when they're filling air. 3 years, he said again. As though the number explained something. As though saying it out loud was still the way he calibrated how far he'd come and how far he hadn't. They moved. The music moved around them. Do you have kids? She asked. A daughter, Lily. She's 6. He said her name the way he always said it, with something that wasn't quite a smile, but functioned like a small softening of the whole face that happened involuntarily. She told me this morning that I made a face about coming tonight. Did you? Apparently. He exhaled. She's very accurate. 6-year-olds usually are, Avery said. They haven't learned yet that being right is sometimes impolite. She'll figure it out, he said. I'm not looking forward to that. Avery smiled. A real one this time, small and brief there, and then not there. But he saw it. He catalogued it the way he catalogued things, not deliberately, just the way his mind worked, always noting, always storing. What about you? He said. What do you do? I'm a physical therapist, she said. I work with a rehab clinic in Norfolk. She paused. Before that, I was in Charlotte. Before that, Raleigh. I move around. What are you moving from? She looked at him sharply. Not offended, surprised, like she'd been asked that before, but not so directly, and not by someone who phrased it that specific way. Moving from. Not moving to. What makes you think I'm moving from something? She said. Because you said 3 cities in one sentence, he said, and you listed them backwards. Another silence. This one different from the others. Heavier, but not oppressively so. More like a silence that had weight, because it was full of something real. A relationship, she said finally. Long one. 5 years. She adjusted her hand on his shoulder. He wasn't... She stopped. Chose words. It wasn't violent or dramatic. It was just wrong. Slowly wrong over a long time in ways I kept telling myself I was imagining. But you weren't. But I wasn't. She looked at the dance floor. It ended 14 months ago. I moved to Norfolk 6 months after that. Running or rebuilding? He asked. She thought about it honestly. He could see her thinking about it. Both, at the same time. I'm not sure those are as different as people say. He nodded slowly. They turned again. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why me? She said it carefully, like she'd been sitting on it and had decided to put it down. There are a lot of people at this wedding, a lot of women. Some of them were looking at you when you came in. She paused. I wasn't. I was specifically not looking at anyone. She tilted her head slightly. So why did you come to my table? Nathan thought about the honest answer. He had several available to him, ranging from glib to evasive to technically true, and he could have deployed any of them, and she would have accepted the one that sounded best. But he said the actual true one, because you looked like someone who was holding a very heavy thing and had stopped expecting anyone to notice. The song changed. Or maybe it ended and a new one started. He wasn't tracking the music anymore. He was tracking her face the way it moved through several expressions in the space of about 4 seconds. Something that opened something, that closed something, that steadied. That's... She started. Probably too much, he said. No, she said. It was no. She pressed her lips together. Then, it was accurate. They kept moving. The distance between them had closed slightly, without either of them making a deliberate decision to close it. His hand at her waist felt less like a formality now. Her hand on his shoulder had settled in instead of hovering. I'm tired of it, she said quietly, almost to herself. Being the woman who is always fine. He waited. You know that performance, she said. When something is wrong or hard or just heavy and people ask how you are and you say fine, because anything else requires too much explaining and too much of their time, and you've learned over years that most people are asking as a formality anyway. She exhaled. And you get very good at it. You get so good at it that eventually you can't remember what the alternative feels like. What does the alternative feel like? He said. She looked at him. A long look, the kind that takes stock. I don't know, she said. I was hoping someone would remind me. He didn't say anything right away. He let the sentence exist in the space between them without covering it with noise, which was something he'd learned in 8 years of naval communications. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is leave the channel open. Then he said, I stopped talking about Claire about 6 months after she died. Not because I didn't want to. Because every time I did, people got this look, like they were bracing. Like grief was a problem they were being asked to solve. So I stopped giving them the problem. And now, she said. Now I talk to Lily, he said. She's 6. She asks questions I haven't thought of myself yet. He paused. Last month she asked me if Mama could see her from wherever she was. I said I thought so. She said... He stopped. His voice stayed level, but something around his eyes worked for a moment. She said she hoped Mama could see her riding her bike, because she'd finally figured out the balance. Avery said nothing. She didn't offer anything performative, no sympathetic sound, no quick condolence. She just listened, and the listening was so complete, so present, that it felt more substantial than most things people said. She sounds remarkable, Avery said after a beat. She didn't get it from me, he said. I'm not sure that's true. He looked at her. She met his eyes directly. A man who notices when a woman is carrying something heavy, who doesn't need to be performing anything, who says true things out loud. She paused. She got some of it from somewhere. He didn't know what to do with that. Not because it wasn't a kind thing. It was a kind thing, but because it landed in a place that had been closed for a while, and the opening of it was disorienting in a way he didn't have a system for. He looked away, looked at the room, And that was when he felt it, a shift in the ambient quality of attention. Not dramatic, not everyone suddenly staring, just a subtle reorientation of peripheral gazes, the way a room adjusts when something has happened that wasn't in the program for the evening. He didn't understand it yet. He wouldn't fully understand it until later. But Avery understood it. He could tell by the small change in her posture, the slight straightening, the almost imperceptible lift of her chin. "They've been watching," she said quietly. He processed that. "Who has?" "Most of the women at the tables near ours," she said. Her voice was very measured, not proud, not performing, just reporting a fact that had reached her before it had reached him. "Since you walked across the room." He didn't look around. He'd been trained not to look around when trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy. "I don't follow. There were women at that bar," she said, "closer to where you were sitting. Easier to reach. Several of them were available, obviously." She paused. "You walked past all of them." "I was trying to find somewhere to sit where I didn't feel like—" "Nathan." She said his name for the first time. It stopped him. "I know what you were doing. I was there." Another pause. "I'm telling you what they saw." He was quiet. "They saw a man," she said, "walk across a room deliberately, past every easy option, and sit down next to the woman who was specifically not trying to be noticed." She looked at him steadily. "That's not invisible. That's the opposite of invisible." He absorbed this. "I didn't think about it that way," he said. "I know you didn't," she said. That's what made it real. The song shifted again, something slower, even quieter, and the floor thinned slightly around them, some couples drifting back to their tables. But neither Nathan nor Avery moved toward their respective tables. They stayed where they were, still moving, still turning slowly in the small orbit they'd built without deciding to build it. "What happens now?" she said. The question was genuine, not coy, not strategic. She said it like someone who actually didn't know and had decided to ask rather than pretend. "I don't know," he said. "I'm not very good at now. I'm better at planning for later." "That's very Navy of you," she said. "Occupational hazard." "I'm bad at later," she said. "I keep making it the whole plan. If I just get through this, if I just get to the other side of this." She shook her head slightly. "I spend so much time getting to later that I forget I'm currently in now." "So maybe we're different kinds of broken," he said. She considered that. "Maybe that's useful." "Or catastrophic," he said. "Could be both," she said. And this time the almost smile made it all the way. He caught it, held it for a second, like something that might not come back if he let it go too fast. Then the song ended. A real ending this time, a defined stopping point, and the room shifted, couples applauding the band, the energy changing, the floor clearing more substantially. The particular spell of the slow music, whatever it had been doing to the ambient quality of the evening, lifted slightly. Nathan lowered his hand from her waist. She lowered hers from his shoulder. They stood on the dance floor, not quite at their tables yet, not quite anywhere. "Can I sit with you for a while?" he said. "At your table." She looked at him. Checking that gauge again, he could see it, the same kind of internal reading he did himself, the quiet assessment of risk and reality. "It's not my table," she said. "You were the only one at it." "True." She reached up and tucked a strand of hair back into place. "Okay." They walked back together. He pulled out her chair, not with dramatic flair, just the straightforward courtesy of someone who did it without thinking, because someone had once told him that the automatic gestures were the ones that came from character rather than performance. She sat. He took the chair across from her. A server appeared. She ordered a glass of wine white and looked at him. "Same," he said. The server left. Avery set her hands on the table. Not folded this time, one palm flat, one loosely curled beside it, more relaxed than when he'd first seen her. He noticed it. "Tell me about Lily," she said. "Really, not the summary version." He looked at her. "What do you want to know?" "Everything that makes you light up when you say her name," she said. "Because you do. You probably don't notice it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he started to talk. He told her about the morning routines, about the warm milk and Gerald the rabbit, and the single missing sock that was always the same sock never explained. He told her about the way Lily had started reading on her own 6 months ago, and now brought books to dinner and read 3 paragraphs out loud before remembering to eat. He told her about the question about the bike, and what Lily said sometimes at bedtime when she was on the edge of sleep, and her guard was completely down the small, serious things a 6-year-old says about the universe when nobody has told them yet that the universe isn't listening. He talked for longer than he planned to. He talked in a way he hadn't talked about Lily to another adult, and he couldn't remember actually. Not like this. Not with someone whose eyes didn't glaze over politely after the third anecdote, who asked actual follow-up questions, who laughed at the right moments, genuinely a real laugh that she didn't manufacture for his benefit. "She sounds like she's going to be someone," Avery said. "She already is someone," he said. "She just hasn't finished figuring out which someone yet." Avery smiled. The full one this time, no pulling back. It changed her face entirely, opened it up, made it warmer, made it look like a face that had smiled a great deal once and was remembering how. The wine arrived. They touched the rims of the glasses together. No toast, just the quiet acknowledgement of 2 people sitting together who hadn't expected to be sitting together tonight. "Tell me something you haven't told anyone," she said. "Not because it's a secret, just because nobody's asked." He held his glass, thought about it genuinely. Then he said, "I have 2 chairs on my balcony, except I don't. I have one. I've had one for 3 years." He looked at the glass. "Lily asked me last spring why there was only 1 chair if the balcony was big enough for 2. I said I'd get another one eventually." He paused. "I've ordered it 3 separate times, canceled the order every time." Avery looked at him. Not with pity, he would have noticed pity, and he would have closed. With something more careful than that. With comprehension. "Why did you cancel it?" she asked. "Because putting a second chair on a balcony is a statement," he said. "About expecting company. About leaving space for something." He stopped. Found the exact word. "Something that isn't just maintenance." "And maintenance is easier," she said. "Maintenance doesn't ask anything from you," he said. She was quiet. Then, "I don't have a balcony, but I have a kitchen table with 4 chairs and I eat every meal standing at the counter." He looked at her. "Because sitting at the table alone felt like admitting something," she said. "What?" "That this is what I chose," she said. "The alone version. And that maybe it's what I'll keep choosing because it's safer and I know the boundaries of it and I know exactly what it costs." She looked at the table between them. "But standing at the counter every night is—" She stopped. "Is exhausting," he said. "Yes," she said. The word landed between them like something being put down after being carried a long way. Around them, the reception rolled on the best man speech. Starting now, laughter erupting from the crowd. Maria pulling Ray to his feet for something. The whole warm machinery of the evening continuing without them, because for the last hour they had been somewhere adjacent to the wedding, but not quite inside it. In a pocket of it. A quiet, specific pocket, where 2 people who had both been managing very heavy things for a very long time were for the first time in longer than either of them could easily say, just talking. Avery turned her glass on the table, a slow rotation looking at it. "I'm not telling you any of this because I'm looking for something," she said. Clearly directly like someone reading a clause from a contract they've written themselves. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not looking." "Neither am I," he said. "But She stopped. "I'm telling you because it's the most honest conversation I've had in a very long time, and I didn't expect it. Tonight of all nights." She looked up. "I came here expecting to smile for 3 hours and drive home alone and think that I handled it well." "Did you handle it well?" he said. "I think I'm handling it differently," she said. "Whether that's better or worse, I don't know yet." He nodded slowly. Outside the hall's tall windows, the Virginia night had gone dark and deep. The kind of dark that arrives when the evening has fully committed to being late. Inside, the lights had shifted warmer, the band playing something easy and undemanding. The crowd settling into the later, looser version of itself that weddings produce when the formalities are over and the feelings have had enough wine to move freely. Nathan looked at the dance floor, then at Avery. "Thank you," he said. She looked surprised. For what? For saying yes, he said. When I asked you to dance, you could have said no. It would have been reasonable to say no. She studied him for a moment. Why did you actually ask the real reason? He met her eyes. Because I was about to leave, he said. I'd decided. I was going to say goodbye to Ray, get my coat, go home and tell myself I'd fulfilled the obligation. He paused. And then I looked at you. And I thought that person is doing the same math I'm doing. And I didn't want to do that math anymore. Not tonight. She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her face. Not the small smile, not the contained expression, but something underneath both of those things. Something more unguarded. Every woman in this room watched you walk across to me, she said. Her voice was low and steady, and completely unhurried. You know that, right? Not one of them, not a few of them. She paused. All of them. He held very still. You didn't pick the easiest option, she said. You didn't pick the loudest woman, or the closest one, or the most available one. You walked across a room full of people, and you sat down next to the woman who was trying to be invisible. She looked at him with those direct brown eyes. That's not small, Nathan. I need you to understand that that is not a small thing. He didn't know what to say. He didn't say anything, because sometimes the right thing, the only right thing, is to let the true thing stay in the air between two people who both need to hear it said out loud and not cover it with anything at all. They sat there, the two of them, at a table in the corner of a wedding reception in Chesapeake, Virginia, while around them 200 people celebrated love in its more conventional forms, and neither of them said anything for a full minute. And the silence between them was the most comfortable silence Nathan Cole had occupied in 3 years. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if this was the beginning of something, or simply a single evening that would remain complete in itself, a clean and unrepeated moment. What he knew was that for the first time since the phone call, since the hospital, since the funeral, since the thousands of 447 mornings he'd constructed his survival from, he was not thinking about the system. He was thinking about right now, and right now felt against all of his defenses and calculations, and the 3 years of careful maintenance he'd built his life around like something worth staying in. He drove home that night with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. That was how Nathan Cole processed things in silence, in motion, in the controlled environment of a vehicle moving through dark streets at exactly the speed limit. It was one of his systems. Not built deliberately, just discovered over years of needing somewhere to put the thoughts that didn't fit inside the house. Lily was asleep when he got home. Mrs. Patterson was in the armchair with a book, and she looked up when he came in and said, "She went down easy. Asked me twice if you'd called." And Nathan said, "Thank you. I'll get you the money tomorrow." And Mrs. Patterson waved him off, the way she always did, collected her things and let herself out. He stood in the hallway for a moment. The house was the specific quiet of a sleeping child, a different quiet than empty something warmer in it, like the air was still holding the shape of the day. He walked to Lily's door, pushed it open 2 inches, the way he always did. She was on her side, one arm thrown over Gerald, the blanket kicked to the foot of the bed, because Lily Cole slept the way she did everything with complete physical commitment to whatever direction she was moving. He watched her for a moment. Then he went to the kitchen, drank a glass of water standing at the counter, and caught himself doing it. Standing at the counter the way Avery had said she always did, because sitting at the table alone felt like admitting something. And he put the glass down and looked at the table. 4 chairs. He had 4 chairs at his kitchen table. He sat at one of them, exactly one, always the same one positioned, so that he was facing the window and not the 3 empty chairs across from him. He sat down at the table, in his chair, and he looked at the chair directly across from him, the one that had been Claire's, and he waited for the feeling. The familiar weight, the particular pressure of the grief that still lived in certain furniture, certain angles of light, certain Tuesday evenings. It came, quieter than it used to. Not gone, he'd stopped pretending it would ever be fully gone, but quieter. He thought about Avery Lane sitting across from him in the corner of that reception hall, turning her wine glass on the table. I'm not telling you any of this because I'm looking for something. He understood that completely. He wasn't looking for something either. Except that he'd told her things he hadn't told anyone in 3 years, And she'd told him things that sounded like they'd been stored under pressure for even longer, and they'd done it easily, almost inevitably, the way information flows when the channel between two people is genuinely open. He didn't know what to do with that. He sat at the table for another 20 minutes. Then he went to bed. Didn't sleep for a long time. Lay on his back in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house hold its breath. At 4:47, the alarm went off. He was already awake. He didn't contact her for 4 days. Not because he was playing a game he'd never been good at. Games had no patience for the architecture of artificial distance, but because he genuinely didn't know the correct approach. He had her name. He could find her professionally without much difficulty. Physical therapist in Norfolk wasn't a narrow field, but it wasn't wide either. Ray would have Maria's contact information, and Maria would have Avery's. But finding someone through a chain of mutual contacts felt like a statement he wasn't ready to make. It had a weight to it, an implication. So he worked. He ran logistics reports. He drove Lily to school in the morning and picked her up in the afternoon and made dinner and read to her at bedtime. The phantom toll booth currently, which Lily was obsessed with, in the way she got obsessed with things completely and without irony, and sat on his balcony with his single chair and watched the city. On the third day, Ray stopped by his office. Ray Garza, freshly married, was still radiating the specific energy of a man who had recently made a decision about his life and was extremely satisfied with the outcome. He sat across from Nathan's desk without being invited, which was Ray's baseline mode of occupying space, and he looked at Nathan with the expression of someone who had information and was deciding how to deliver it. "Maria wants to know if you enjoyed the wedding," Ray said. "Tell her it was great. She looked happy." "She was. She is." Ray nodded. "She also mentioned that her friend Avery seemed to have had a good night." Nathan looked at his report. "That's good." "Maria said she seemed different on the drive home. Like..." Ray searched for the word. "Lighter." Nathan said nothing. "She also said Avery asked if she knew much about you," Ray said. Nathan put down his pen, looked at Ray. Ray spread his hands with magnificent innocence. "I'm just reporting what was reported to me." "You're not just reporting," Nathan said. "You're engineering." "I'm a logistics man," Ray said. "I facilitate movement of necessary materials from one location to another." He stood up. "Just saying. Maria has her number, if someone wanted it." He left before Nathan could tell him to stop doing whatever he was doing, which was probably Ray's intention all along. Nathan looked at his desk for a while. Then he picked up his phone and texted Ray. "Give me the number." Ray's response came in 11 seconds. "Already asked Maria." "Sending now," followed immediately by a number with a Norfolk area code. Then after a pause, Ray sent one more message. She said yes before Maria finished the sentence. Nathan read that twice. Then he put the phone face down on his desk and went back to his logistics report and spent the next 40 minutes not thinking about it, which was not successful, and then he picked the phone back up. He didn't overthink the message. Overthinking was what he did with systems, with plans, with contingencies. This wasn't any of those things. He typed, "This is Nathan. From the wedding. Ray gave me your number with approximately zero subtlety. I apologize for him." 3 minutes passed. Then Maria handed over my number with a look on her face I've seen before. I apologize for her. Then, "Hi Nathan." He read it twice. Then he typed, "Hi Avery." There was a short pause. "How's Lily?" He blinked. He hadn't expected the conversation to start there. He'd prepared himself vaguely for the tentative pleasantries, the weather equivalent of early contact. Not Lily. "She finished the Phantom toll booth last night," he typed. 3 days ahead of schedule. Cried at the end. Denied crying. "That's the most Nathan Cole thing I've heard," she responded. A reading schedule. It wasn't an official schedule. It was a pace. That's a schedule, Nathan. He found himself sitting straighter, which was already his default posture, so the change was something below posture. Something interior. "How are you?" he typed. There was a longer pause this time. "Honestly, I've been thinking about what you said at the wedding. About the second chair. I keep thinking about it." He stared at the screen. "Me too," he typed. And then, before he could reconsider, Do you want to get coffee? No agenda. Just coffee. Another pause. Yes, she said. But I need you to know I'm terrible at casual. I've tried it and I'm not built for it. I'm not casual either, he typed. I'm a Navy logistics specialist. I have opinions about coffee shop seating arrangements. The response came quickly this time, and he could almost hear it. God help us both. Saturday, he asked. Saturday, she said. The coffee shop was in the older part of Norfolk, the kind of place that had been there long enough to develop opinions about itself with wood floors and mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu in handwriting that required interpretation. Nathan arrived 6 minutes early and found a table against the wall. Good sightlines, low traffic corner position, and ordered a black coffee and waited. She arrived 3 minutes after the hour. He'd half expected her to be early, had half expected her to be punctual, the way someone is punctual when they've been thinking about showing up all week and finally just committed to it. She wore a dark green jacket and her hair down, which was different from the wedding, and she spotted him before he raised a hand and navigated to the table with the direct, purposeful movement of someone who had decided to be somewhere and was going to be there completely. You got a corner table, she said. Better sightlines, he said. Of course. She sat. She looked at him the way she'd looked at him at the wedding, directly without flinching, like she'd decided that looking away was more work than just seeing what was there. You look different outside the suit. You look different with your hair down. She tilted her head. Better or worse? Different, he said. Both versions make sense. She seemed to consider that a reasonable answer. She ordered, and when the server left, she folded her hands on the table. Not the closed-contained fold from the wedding, something more open, and said, I've been thinking about what I want to get out of this. Okay, he said. Not this, she corrected, gesturing between them. This moment. Today. I've been thinking about what I want. She paused. I don't usually do that. Usually I figure out what makes sense and do that instead. What's the difference? He asked. Sense is about logistics, she said. Wanting is about... She stopped. I don't know. Something harder to plan for. He nodded slowly. What do you want? I want to have a conversation with someone where I don't spend half of it managing what I'm revealing, she said. I want to say something true, and have it received as true instead of analyzed for what it means about my damage level. She looked at him. I want to have coffee with someone who actually showed up, not a version of himself that was optimized for the first impression. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, I almost canceled this morning. She blinked. Why? Because I ran the scenarios, he said. What if this is good, and then it complicates everything? What if it's not good, and I've disrupted the system for nothing? What if Lily... He stopped. What if I start wanting something, and I don't know how to want things anymore? She was very still across the table. I almost canceled, he said. And then Lily came into the kitchen at 5 a.m. and asked me why I was dressed already, and I said I had plans, and she said, good plans or obligation plans, and I said... He paused. I said good plans, and she said, then stop making that face. Avery stared at him. Then she made a sound, a real laugh, involuntary, caught off guard by it, that rang out loud enough that the couple at the next table looked over. She covered her mouth. The laugh kept going for a second anyway. She's 6, Nathan said. She's terrifying, Avery said. And then, she sounds wonderful. She's both, he said, simultaneously. The coffees arrived. They both wrapped their hands around their cups. Him around the plain mug, her around the slightly larger one she'd ordered, and the laughter settled into something warmer, more comfortable, like a room after the windows have been opened and the air has moved through it. Tell me about the physical therapy, he said. She looked slightly surprised. Why? Because you mentioned 3 cities, he said, and the work came with you to all of them, which means it matters to you. She studied him. You remember everything, don't you? I remember things that were said like they mattered, he said. You said 3 cities like you were accounting for them. That's different from saying 3 cities like they were just geography. She looked at her coffee. Then she started talking, She talked about what she actually loved about the work, not the clinical language of it, but the underneath of it, the specific satisfaction of watching a person recover something they'd been told was gone. A veteran relearning to use a hand. An elderly woman who'd been told she wouldn't walk without a cane after her hip replacement, who'd proven that wrong 6 weeks ahead of schedule. The particular relationship between the body and the will, how the body kept score, but the will could change the mathematics of it if someone was there to show it how. That's what I'm actually doing, she said. Not rehabbing muscles, reminding people that the body is not the ceiling. He listened the way he'd listened at the wedding completely, without filling the space with noise. And she noticed. She noticed because she felt herself saying more than she'd planned in the direction of things that were more true than cautious, and instead of stopping herself, she just kept going. You're easy to talk to, she said. That's... She stopped. I want to say that's surprising, but I think it was obvious at the wedding, which is maybe why I talked to you the way I did. Like I'd already checked something off a list I didn't know I had. What was on the list? He asked. Whether you were actually present, she said, or whether you were performing being present, which is different. She paused. Most people perform it. They make the face of listening. They say, at the right intervals, but they're not actually there. She looked at him. You were there. I'm a quiet person, he said. It can read as either extremely attentive or extremely uncomfortable. Which is it usually? Depends on the situation, he said. Tonight, it's attentive. Tonight she noticed, not right now. Tonight, like he was already thinking of it as a complete unit of time, already giving it more space than a single coffee on a Saturday morning. She didn't say that. She filed it. Can I ask you something? He said. You can always ask, she said. I reserve the right not to answer. Fair? He held his cup. The relationship, the 5-year one. Was it hard to leave, or was it hard to stay, and you just chose the harder of the two? She was quiet for a long moment. It was hard to admit, she said. That's the real answer. It wasn't a terrible relationship. He wasn't terrible. He was comfortable. Familiar. After enough years, you stop being able to see the difference between loving someone and just knowing them completely. She pressed her lips together. I stayed 2 years past when I should have left because I kept thinking that what I felt was comfort, and comfort was what love was supposed to feel like when it matured. But it wasn't, he said. But it wasn't, she said. Comfort and love are not the same thing. Comfort is what you feel when nothing is challenging you. Love is what you feel when everything is, and you're still... She stopped. Found the word. Still choosing. He was quiet for a moment. How do you know when you're choosing versus when you're just staying because leaving requires more energy? She looked at him. The question was too specific to be abstract, and they both knew it. You ask yourself whether the other person makes you more yourself or less yourself, she said. Over time, over years, does being with them expand you or contract you? She paused. With him, I got smaller. Slowly. So slowly, I didn't notice until I looked up one day and couldn't remember the last time I'd said exactly what I thought without checking it first. Nathan held that. Held it the way he held things that required processing without rushing to respond, without filling the space. Claire made me larger, he said, quietly. She laughed at exactly the right moments, and it gave you permission to not be serious about everything. He looked at the window. I got smaller after she died. Not because she was gone. I understood that grief makes you smaller, but because I let it become permanent. I stopped. He stopped. I stopped expecting to grow again. The coffee shop moved around them. People came in, ordered left. The chalkboard menu reflected light from the street outside. A child at a table near the door knocked over a cup and laughed about it. Can I tell you something true? Avery said. Yes, he said. I thought about the wedding a lot, she said. Specifically the dance. Specifically, she steadied. When you asked me what happens now, and I said I didn't know. I've been thinking about that answer since Thursday. whether it was honest or whether I was just managing again. Was it honest? He asked. Partly, she said. The honest part was that I don't know what happens. The part I was managing was... She looked at him. That I wanted something to happen. And wanting something felt dangerous because I've been wrong about wanting things before, and it cost me 5 years and 3 cities. He looked at her steadily. You're not wrong about wanting this. She blinked. I don't know what this is, he said immediately clearly. I'm not overstating it. I'm not making promises about something I don't have enough information on yet. He paused. But I know I'm sitting at this table because I wanted to be here, and I know that wanting to be somewhere has been absent for a long time. And it's here now, and it's clear. So whatever your instinct is telling you about this being worth the risk of wanting... He held her eyes. I think your instinct is right. Avery Lane looked at Nathan Cole across a coffee shop table in Norfolk, Virginia on a Saturday morning in November, with both hands around a cup of coffee that had gone slightly cool, and she felt something she hadn't felt in so long that she'd almost forgotten to put a name to it. She felt like herself. Not the managed version, not the fine version, not the 3 cities always landing on her feet handling it version. Just herself. Sitting at a table with a quiet man who remembered the things she said and asked the questions underneath the questions and didn't run from the weight of the actual answers. Okay, she said. He tilted his head. Okay what? Okay, I'll stop managing it, she said. For this coffee. I can't promise longer than a coffee. A coffee is sufficient, he said. I'll take it. She smiled at him. The full one again. The one from the wedding. The one that opened her face up entirely. And he received it without looking away, without deflecting, without reaching for something safer. They sat for another hour. He told her about the specific organizational logic of naval logistics, and she laughed at the parts where he described it with a straight face, and she was fairly sure he was aware of how it sounded, and was doing it deliberately. She told him about her worst patient, not worst in skill, worst in attitude. A retired high school football coach who was convinced he knew more about his own knee than she did, and argued with every instruction, and who was now 8 months later playing recreational golf twice a week, and had left her a voicemail she still hadn't deleted because it was the closest to an apology a man of that generation could apparently get. He said he'd been wrong, she said. He didn't say I was right. He said you weren't wrong. There's a difference. There is, Nathan said. It was enough, she said. It was actually enough. When they left, they stood outside on the sidewalk in the November air, which was cold and clear and without ceremony. What are you doing Wednesday? He said. She looked at him. Working until 6. Dinner after, he said. There's a place on Granby Street that Lily approved when we went in October. She has strong opinions about restaurants for someone who eats everything plain. Avery looked at him for a moment. Lily approved it. She rates places on a rubric she invented herself. Friendliness of the server, quality of the bread, whether the menu has pictures. He paused. It scored well. On that rubric, Avery said slowly, I would definitely want to go to the Bread and Pictures restaurant. Wednesday at 6:30, he said. 6:30, she said. She walked to her car. He stood on the sidewalk and watched her go, not dramatically, not with the calculated stillness of a man who knew he was being watched. Just a man watching someone walk away who he was already thinking about seeing on Wednesday. She unlocked the car, opened the door, looked back once. He raised a hand. Brief, simple. She got in the car. He walked to his truck, started it, and sat there for a moment before pulling out. He thought about Avery Lane saying, I'll stop managing it for this coffee. He thought about the way she said true things with the composure of someone who'd practiced composure so long that honesty required a small act of courage every time. He thought about what she'd said about growing smaller when you were with the wrong person. He thought about the second chair, the one he'd ordered and canceled 3 times. He pulled out of the parking spot and drove home, and the radio stayed off, and the silence in the truck was not the same silence it had been on the drive home from the wedding. It was the same brand of quiet, but it had something in it now. Something that hadn't been there before. Something that felt carefully and without overstatement, like the earliest possible version of forward motion. Not a destination, not a plan, Just direction. Just the first suggestion of a current finding an open path. Wednesday happened. Then the following Saturday. Then a Tuesday evening when she called him instead of texting because she'd had a rough day with a patient who'd relapsed and she didn't want to type it. She wanted to say it out loud to someone who would actually hear it. He answered on the second ring. He always answered on the second ring. She noticed that about him, not the first ring, which would feel frantic, not the third or fourth, which would feel like she'd caught him at something. The second ring, consistent, like he was always in a position to pick up, but not waiting desperately for the phone to move. It was such a Nathan Cole detail that she'd stopped finding it funny and started finding it quietly reassuring. "Bad day," she said when he picked up. "Tell me," he said. Not, "I'm sorry." First, not what happened, not the performance of concern. Just tell me, like the thing she needed was already understood, and the only question was where to start. So she told him. She told him about the patient, a 38-year-old man recovering from a spinal injury who'd been doing well, genuinely well. 2 months of steady progress that she'd watched with the particular satisfaction of work that was working, and who'd come in Tuesday morning, moving wrong, holding himself wrong, with the face of someone who'd stopped believing in the direction they'd been traveling. He said he didn't see the point, she said. Not the therapy, the whole thing. The future version of himself we'd been building toward. She paused. He said he'd been looking at it for 2 months, and he still couldn't see himself in it. "What did you say?" Nathan asked. "I told him to sit down," she said. "I pulled up a chair across from him, and I sat down, and I said that the version of yourself you can currently imagine is always smaller than the version that's actually possible. Because the imagination works from what you've already lived, and you haven't lived the recovered version yet. You can't picture something you haven't experienced." She stopped. "I don't know if it landed. He stayed for the session. He worked hard. But I don't know." "It landed," Nathan said. "You don't know that." "He stayed," Nathan said. "He worked hard. That's not nothing. That's a person deciding to keep moving, even when they can't see where they're going yet." A pause. "That's actually the harder version of faith." She was quiet on her end of the line. "You say things," she said. "What? You say things," she repeated. "Exactly right things. And you say them simply without the weight of wanting credit for saying them." She let out a slow breath. "It's disarming." "I'm not trying to disarm you," he said. "I know," she said. "That's the part that disarms me." They talked for an hour and 20 minutes. She knew the exact duration because she'd looked at her phone when she dialed, and again when they finally said goodnight, and the gap between those 2 numbers surprised her. Not because it felt long, it had felt like 30 minutes maybe, but because an hour and 20 minutes on the phone was something she hadn't done since her mid-20s, since before the relationship that had slowly contracted her, since before she'd learned to manage every conversation into something efficient and bounded. She sat on her couch after they hung up and looked at the kitchen. At the counter where she always ate. She thought about the table. She thought about 4 chairs and 1 person. Then she got up, moved the papers and the mail and the jacket she'd thrown across it 3 days ago, pulled out a chair, and sat down at the table. By herself. In the middle of a Wednesday night. It felt like a statement. She let it be one. December arrived without ceremony, the way December always does gradually, and then all at once the cold setting in properly. The city shifting its ambient quality towards something more internal, more inclined toward staying in. Nathan drove Lily to school in the mornings and watched his breath in the air when he walked back to the truck, and at work the logistics division handled year-end inventory and the particular bureaucratic density of Q4, and in the evenings more often than not there was Avery, not always in person. Sometimes just the phone, sometimes texts that ran long. She was better at texting than he'd expected, more expressive the written version of her slightly looser than the in-person version, like the keyboard gave her a fraction more permission. He saved none of the texts deliberately, but he read them in a way that meant he could have recalled most of them if asked. She met Lily for the first time on a Sunday in early December. It was not orchestrated. It was not planned with the care Nathan applied to most things. It happened because he'd mentioned he was taking Lily to the Nauticus Museum she'd been asking to see the Wisconsin for 2 months, because Lily Cole, daughter of a Navy man, had opinions about battleships, and Avery had said she'd never been, and he'd said carefully, "You could come." And she'd said after a pause that he'd respected, without filling, "Okay." She arrived at the museum entrance 5 minutes before them, which he noted and appreciated. She was wearing a navy peacoat and had her hair pulled back and was standing with her hands in her pockets, looking at the entrance with the expression of someone who was managing their own anticipation. He recognized it completely. Lily spotted her before he could introduce them. Lily had been briefed not formally, just in the way Nathan communicated with his daughter, which was honestly and without excessive architecture. He'd said he had a friend joining them, a woman, someone he'd met at Uncle Ray's wedding. Lily had processed this with the specific serious attention she applied to information she considered significant, and had asked 2 questions. Is she nice, and does she like battleships? He'd said he thought yes to the first, and wasn't sure about the second. Lily had considered this acceptable. "Are you Avery?" Lily said, stopping 2 feet in front of her. Avery looked down. She had the good sense Nathan watched it happen not to crouch into the exaggerated register adults sometimes used with children, but to simply look at Lily directly and say, "Yes. Are you Lily?" "Yes." Lily looked at her with the complete unfiltered assessment that 6-year-olds conduct without apology. "Do you like battleships?" "I've never seen one up close," Avery said. "So I don't have an opinion yet." Lily considered this. "That's fair," she said. "I'll tell you what to think about it." Avery glanced at Nathan. He gave her nothing, just waited. "I'd appreciate that," Avery said to Lily. Lily nodded, apparently satisfied, and turned and walked toward the entrance. Nathan fell into step beside Avery, and she said quietly, and without looking at him, "She's terrifying." "I told you," he said. "You undersold it." But she said it with something in her voice that wasn't alarm. Something closer to admiration. "Yeah, Lily." It turned out was an exceptional tour guide for a 6-year-old. She had absorbed enough from her father's professional context to narrate the Wisconsin with more accuracy than most children and some adults, and she delivered her commentary with the confidence of someone who had checked her sources. Avery asked questions, real ones, not the performative questions adults ask children to seem interested. She asked about the guns, about the crew size, about whether Lily thought it would be hard to live on a ship for months. "My dad does long deployments sometimes," Lily said. "He says it's quiet in a way that's different from home quiet." Avery looked at Nathan. "What's the difference?" "Home quiet has someone in it," he said. Lily had already moved on, pointing at something and demanding attention. Avery stayed 1 step behind that, watching, and Nathan watched her watching, and something in his chest moved in a way he had learned to stop arguing with. They ate lunch after at a diner 2 blocks from the museum, a booth, Lily on one side, Nathan and Avery on the other, which had arranged itself naturally without discussion, and which Lily had accepted without comment, except to observe that the menu had pictures, which was good. Nathan ordered for himself. Avery ordered for herself. Lily ordered apple juice and a grilled cheese, and then set her elbows on the table and looked at Avery with the frank evaluation she'd been conducting all morning. "Do you like my dad?" she said. Nathan said, "Lily, I'm asking—" Lily said, without taking her eyes off Avery. Avery didn't flinch. She looked at Lily steadily and said, "I think your dad is one of the most genuinely good people I've met in a long time." Lily processed this. "That means yes." "It means yes," Avery said. Lily nodded slowly. "He doesn't smile enough," she said with the clinical detachment of someone delivering a professional assessment. "He smiles when I do something funny, or when he thinks I can't see him, but not regular smiling." She looked at Nathan. "You should smile regular." Nathan said nothing for a moment, then, "I'll take it under advisement." "He always says that," Lily told Avery. "It means he heard it, but he's not promising anything." "I know," Avery said. "I've noticed." Lily looked between them. Something in her small face settled into an expression Nathan recognized the look she made when she'd measured something and found it satisfactory. She picked up her apple juice and drank through the straw and looked at the menu pictures with the air of someone who had completed her work for the day. Nathan looked at Avery. She looked at him. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. He ordered the second chair the following week. This time he didn't cancel. He told no one. He didn't mention it to Avery, didn't post about it anywhere, didn't mark the occasion with any kind of ceremony. The chair arrived on a Thursday afternoon in a flat box, and he assembled it on the balcony in 20 minutes, and he set it beside the original chair, and he went inside and made dinner. That night after Lily was in bed, he went to the balcony. He sat in his original chair. He looked at the new one. It was the same model. He'd ordered the exact same chair, not because he lacked imagination, but because it was a good chair, and because matching was its own kind of intention. They sat side by side, practical and unpretentious, and the city moved below, the way it always moved, traffic and lights, and the distant sound of a port city at work. He didn't feel the weight he'd expected to feel. He'd braced for it, the grief-adjacent sensation of doing something that marked change, that acknowledged that the structure of his solitude was being deliberately altered. He'd braced for the image of Claire, for the particular form of guilt that sometimes arrived when he moved toward something she would have wanted for him, because the guilt did not care about logic. But what he felt sitting there looking at the two chairs was something quieter than he'd anticipated. He felt like someone who had finally stopped arguing with the direction of water. He texted Avery. No preamble, I ordered the second chair. She read it, he saw the read receipt, and didn't respond for 4 minutes. Then, tell me what it looks like out there tonight. He looked at the city. Clear, cold. The port lights are on. Some kind of container ship moving in from the east. Is it a good view? It's always been a good view, he typed. I just usually watch it alone. Another pause. Not always, she said. He read it twice. No, he typed back. Not always. The thing about January was that it arrived with the particular cruelty of the month that comes after December, stripped of the warmth and the lights and the collective agreement to be gentler with each other, reduced to its plainest form, cold and functional and without event. Nathan ran his systems. The Navy ran its systems. Lily went back to school and came home with drawings and opinions, and a new obsession with how bridges were built, which she had apparently decided was her primary area of inquiry until further notice. Avery worked her long hours and texted him about difficult patients without names. Always without names, always careful with the privacy of her work, and called on Tuesday evenings, which had become a pattern without being declared one. The pattern had weight. It had the satisfying efficiency of something that worked because it was right for both people involved, not because either of them had forced it. They had not talked about what they were. Nathan had noticed this without being troubled by it. The word was not the thing. The thing was real, whether or not it was named, and he'd found that in this particular case, naming it felt like the kind of administrative step that was less about clarifying the situation and more about managing anxiety. He didn't have the anxiety. He didn't think she did either. What he had was Wednesday dinners and Sunday afternoons and Tuesday phone calls and a second chair on his balcony that Avery had sat in exactly twice, once in December, once in the first week of January, and both times she'd sat in it with the particular quality of someone occupying space that was meant for them, not performing comfort, but actually inside it. He noticed. He always noticed. And then on a Tuesday evening in late January, she called at the usual time, and her voice was wrong before she said a word. Not broken. Avery Lane's voice was not a breaking voice. It was a voice that had learned to hold its shape under pressure, but different, tighter. The way a structure sounds when something is pressing against it from the outside. He texted me, she said. Nathan was quiet. Connor, she said. The name landed like a dropped tool, practical, heavy, occupying space. My ex. The 5 years. She paused. He texted me Sunday. I didn't tell you right away because I was trying to figure out what I felt about it before I said it out loud. What did he say? Nathan asked. That he missed me. Her voice was level, but the levelness was work. That he'd been thinking about where it went wrong. She stopped. He said he wanted to talk, just talk. That he thought maybe we gave up too fast. Nathan held the phone and didn't say anything. I know what you're thinking, she said. Tell me what I'm thinking, he said. You're thinking that 5 years doesn't go wrong because of a decision. It goes wrong because of 5 years of smaller decisions. She exhaled. And you'd be right. I wasn't thinking that, he said. I was thinking that this is your call to make, and I'm listening. She was quiet for a moment. That's not a nothing response, Nathan. I know, he said. I know exactly what it is. She absorbed that. He could hear her moving a small sound fabric like she was sitting down or shifting position. The thing is, she said, I didn't feel what I expected to feel when I read it. What did you expect to feel? I don't know. Something bigger. Something that made it complicated. She paused. Instead, I felt tired. Just immediately tired. Like someone offering me a puzzle I'd already solved and the answer wasn't good, and I had no interest in going through it again. He said nothing. Let her keep moving. But then I started second-guessing the tired, she said, wondering whether the tired was clarity or whether it was avoidance. Whether I'd just gotten so good at protecting myself that I couldn't tell the difference between a boundary and a wall. Can I ask you something? He said. Yes. When he texted, Nathan said, what was the first thing you thought, not the second thought? The first one. Before you started analyzing it. She was quiet for several seconds. Oh, she said. Here comes the old weight. He held that. Here comes the old weight, he repeated quietly. Not, I wonder what he means, or maybe I should hear him out. Here comes the old weight. Yes, she said. That's your answer, he said. The line was quiet for a long moment. Not the comfortable quiet they'd built between them over months. Something more fragile, more exposed, the quiet of someone standing at a decision point and knowing it. I'm scared, she said. It came out plainly without decoration, just the fact of it. Of what? He asked. Of choosing wrong again, she said. Of thinking I know what I want and being wrong about it. She stopped. I was wrong for 5 years, Nathan. I was convinced, genuinely convinced, that what I had was what I was supposed to have. And I was wrong for 5 years. You weren't wrong for 5 years, he said. You learned something true for 5 years, and then you did the hardest thing, which is stop when the learning was done. He paused. That's not the same thing. She didn't respond immediately. He heard her breath slow, deliberate. What do I do? She said. And she said it like she was asking him something real, not for permission, not to transfer the decision. Asking the way you ask someone you trust when you want a voice from outside your own head. You do what your first thought told you to do, he said. And you don't go back over it to see if it holds up. It held up. The first thought always holds up. A pause. You know this already. You said, here comes the old weight. You already knew. I already knew, she said. Then trust that, he said. Another silence. Then, are you scared of this? She chose the word. Of us. He thought about it honestly. Not the managed answer, not the efficient one. The true one. Every single day, he said. I'm scared that I've forgotten how to do this. I'm scared that I'll ask too much or offer too little. I'm scared that Lily gets attached and something goes wrong, and I've exposed her to another loss. He stopped. I'm scared that I'll be so careful about all of those things that I'll lose this before it becomes what it's supposed to be. And, she said. And I'm still here, he said. I'm still calling. I'm still showing up. He paused. The fear is real, but it's not the loudest thing. What's the loudest thing? She said. You, he said simply. You're the loudest thing. She was quiet. I don't know how to respond to that, she said softly. You don't have to, he said. It's not a question. She was quiet for a long time after that. He didn't fill it. He'd learned over these months that her silences were not empty. They were where she processed, where she moved through things, where she came out the other side of herself and found out what she actually thought. Interrupting them was the wrong move. He'd never interrupted one. I'm going to tell him no, she said finally. Okay, he said. Not for you, she said, clearly carefully. I need you to hear that. Not because of what we are or where this is going, because it's the right answer for me. Because the tired I felt was real, and I'm not. I'm not going back into something that made me smaller, just because leaving it took 3 cities and a lot of careful reconstruction. I hear that, he said. Good, she said. A beat. Nathan, she said. Yeah. Thank you for not telling me what to do. You didn't need me to tell you, he said. You needed someone to hold the space while you figured out you already knew. She made a sound, not the laugh, something beside the laugh, something more interior. You're doing it again, she said. What? The right thing, she said. Simply. She texted Connor the next morning. 3 sentences clear and clean, the way she did things when she'd made up her mind. She didn't share the exact words with Nathan, and he didn't ask. What she told him was this. She'd written it, read it once, sent it, and closed the conversation. She'd felt nothing after except the specific satisfaction of a door properly shut. He texted back, Good. She texted, That's all you've got. Just good. He replied, You handled it. It was good. I'm proud of you. Is that better? There was a pause. Then, yes, significantly. Then I'm sitting at my kitchen table eating breakfast. He read that and held his phone for a moment. Both feet on the floor, he sent. All 4 chair legs, she replied. He smiled. Not the small functional smile, not the 60% one. The real version, the one Lily told him he didn't do enough. He was alone in his kitchen when it happened. 4:47 in the morning, black coffee, the particular dark before the Virginia winter light arrived. But the smile happened anyway, without audience, without occasion, without anything requiring it, except the simple fact of a woman he cared about sitting at her table, instead of her counter, choosing the full version of her own life one morning at a time. He thought about water finding an open path. He thought about Lily asking if the balcony was big enough for 2 chairs. He thought about how the things that matter most are rarely announced. They accumulate, quietly. The way light accumulates before sunrise without drama, without event, until suddenly the dark is gone, and you couldn't have said exactly when it left. He finished his coffee. He went to wake Lily for school, and for the first time in 3 years, the 4:47 alarm felt not like the start of survival, but like the start of a day that had something in it worth arriving for. Spring came to Virginia Beach, the way it always did, without asking permission, without announcement, just a morning when the air was different, and the light had shifted its angle, and something in the city collectively exhaled after the long compression of winter. Nathan noticed it on a Tuesday in late March. He was standing in the kitchen at 4:47 with his black coffee, and the window above the sink was showing him a sky that had changed overnight, softer, higher, the particular blue of early spring that didn't exist in any other season. He stood there longer than usual, just looking at it. The system said, move. The system said, the sequence was coffee, then shower, then Lily, then school, then base. But for a moment, he just stood at the window and looked at the sky and let himself feel that something had shifted. He'd been feeling it for weeks. Not in dramatic ways. Nothing about Nathan Cole operated in dramatic ways, but in the small calibrations of daily life, the internal instruments that registered change without announcing it. He slept differently. Not better necessarily, not worse, just differently. More present inside the sleep, less braced against the morning. He sat at the kitchen table now, instead of at the counter. Not always, but most days. He ate dinner there with Lily, and sometimes the chair across from him was empty, and sometimes on Wednesday evenings, and occasional Sundays, it wasn't. He'd stopped counting the number of times he'd seen Avery, and started just noticing that seeing her had become a feature of his life rather than an event within it. That was a distinction that mattered. Events you scheduled and prepared for. Features you just lived inside of. Lily had opinions about this development as Lily had opinions about everything delivered with the directness of someone who hadn't learned yet to package truth in social cushioning. Avery's going to come to my recital, right? she said one morning in March, over breakfast, in the tone she used when something was already decided and she was simply verifying the paperwork. Nathan looked up from his coffee. I haven't asked her. Lily looked at him with the expression she reserved for conclusions she found obvious. Then ask her. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple, Lily said. She picked up her toast. You ask people things, they say yes or no, you know the answer. That's how asking works. He looked at his 6-year-old daughter, who had apparently decided she was done waiting for him to manage his own progress, and had taken the matter into her own hands. When did you get this way? He said. I was always this way, she said. You're just noticing. He asked Avery that evening. He texted it simply, Lily has a school recital on the 14th. She specifically asked me to ask you. Then after a pause, I'm also asking you. The reply came quickly. I'll be there. What does she need me to wear? He stared at that for a moment, then typed. Why would she have dress code requirements for her audience? Nathan Avery replied. Have you met your daughter? He thought about it. Then texted Lily in the next room because sometimes it was faster, and Lily replied in 30 seconds with a specific color preference and a note about avoiding anything that made noise when you moved because it was distracting. He forwarded it to Avery without comment. Her response was a single word. Obviously. The recital was in the school gymnasium on a Friday evening, folding chairs arranged in rows facing a low stage, the particular controlled chaos of 60-something children between the ages of 5 and 8, who had been taught 3 songs, and were now performing them for an audience of parents who had taken off work early and were filming everything on their phones. Avery sat beside him in the 3rd row. She'd worn something simple. Nothing that made noise when she moved a dark burgundy that Lily had apparently pre-approved via the texted negotiations Nathan had been only partly aware of. She sat the way she sat everywhere straight, present paying actual attention, and when Lily's class came out and arranged themselves on the risers, Avery leaned slightly forward the way you lean when something has your genuine interest. Lily found them in the audience immediately. She had her father's eyes gray and precise, and capable of locating a specific thing in a complex field, and she made eye contact with Nathan first, then with Avery, and something in her small face shifted into a satisfaction so complete it was nearly adult. She faced forward. She sang her 3 songs with total commitment and zero self-consciousness, which was Lily's baseline operating mode for everything she decided was worth doing. Afterward in the hallway, Lily ran to Nathan and then stopped a step short of Avery and said with the gravity of a diplomat concluding a treaty, You came. I came, Avery said. You wore the right color, Lily said. I had good information. Lily considered her for a moment. Then she reached out and took Avery's hand, the way small children take hands without asking, without ceremony, as though the hand was simply the correct place to put hers, and said, Come look at our art that's on the wall. Ms. Hendricks put mine near the window because she said it had good light. Avery looked at Nathan over Lily's head. He gave her nothing, just watched. She let herself be pulled down the hallway by a 6-year-old who had apparently made a unilateral decision about how the evening was going to proceed. He followed them both. He watched Avery genuinely crouch at Lily's level, not the performative adult talking to a child crouch, but actually going down there into Lily's sightline, into Lily's world, and look at the drawing on the wall with the focused attention she gave to things that deserved it. It was a drawing of a house. In front of the house, there was a balcony, and on the balcony, there were 2 chairs, and in the chairs were 2 stick figures, and above the house, drawn in careful yellow crayon, was what appeared to be a sun that had also been given a face, smiling. Nathan looked at the drawing for a long moment. Avery looked at it, then looked at him. It's our house, Lily told Avery matter-of-factly. That's Daddy, and that's you. I put the sun with a face because my teacher said the sun gives everything light, and I thought that was right for this picture. Avery straightened up slowly. She didn't say anything for a moment. Nathan watched her face move through several things in rapid succession, the quick, bright sting behind her eyes that she controlled before it became anything visible. The breath she took that was just a fraction deeper than normal, the composure reassembling itself cleanly and without drama. I love it, she said, Her voice was level. "I know," said Lily. It was May when she first stayed late enough that the city had fully gone quiet. Not the first time she'd been at the house in the evening that had become ordinary, in the best way, the slow accretion of ordinary, that Nathan had not let himself anticipate, but had allowed himself to receive. But this was later than usual, a Saturday that had started with dinner and become conversation that neither of them moved to end. And at some point, Nathan had said, "Come sit outside," and they'd gone to the balcony. Both chairs. She settled into the second one, the one he'd ordered and assembled in November, the one she'd sat in twice before. And it received her the way good furniture receives a person, when the fit is right. Nathan sat in his chair. The city moved below them, the port lights on a warm spring night, with actual warmth in it for the first time in months. They were quiet for a while. Not feeling it, just being in it side by side, looking at the same view he'd looked at alone for 3 years. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Always," he said. "I drove home from the recital last month," she said. "And I sat in my car in the parking lot of my building for 20 minutes. She looked at the city. Not because anything was wrong, because something was too right. And I didn't know what to do with that." "Too right how?" he asked. "Lily took my hand," she said. "And it felt—" She stopped. Found it. "It felt like something I didn't know I was missing. Not just the hand. She made a small gesture. The being chosen. By a 6-year-old who doesn't do anything she doesn't mean." A pause. "She didn't ask you if it was okay. She just decided I was someone she was going to take somewhere." "That's Lily's highest form of approval," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. He looked at her profile, the way the city light reached her face from below, the particular quality of her expression when she was being completely honest, without performing the honesty. "Are you scared?" he asked. The same question she'd asked him in January. She thought about it. "Not the same scared," she said. "Not the old scared. The 'this is real and real things can break' scared." She paused. "The scared you feel when something actually matters." "Yeah," he said. "That one I know." "I know you know," she said. The city hummed below them. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn, low and single, marking something, arrival or departure. He couldn't tell which from this far. "I was thinking," she said carefully. The way she said things she'd been holding for a while. "About what you said, at the wedding. When I asked why you came to my table." She turned to look at him. "You said I looked like someone carrying a heavy thing who had stopped expecting anyone to notice." "I remember," he said. "Nobody had noticed in a long time," she said. "I'd gotten so good at carrying it quietly that people stopped looking." She paused. "And then you walked across a room full of people, and you sat down, and you noticed the exact right thing." She held his eyes. "I don't think you understand what that was. What it actually was for someone who had been invisible to the people who were supposed to see her." "I see you," he said, quietly, without amplification, just the plain fact of it. She held that for a moment. "I know," she said. "That's the whole thing. That's the entire thing right there." They sat in the 2 chairs, and the night moved around them. He thought about the version of himself who had arrived at that wedding expecting nothing and hoping for less. Who had sat at table 7 with his water glass and his phone face down, and his 3 years of careful maintenance watching the room with the detached attention of a man who had decided that the current would not reach him here, that he was above the waterline, that survival was the same thing as living. He thought about the moment he stood up. He still couldn't fully explain it. The Navy had trained him to move toward problems, to assess and act. But this hadn't felt like a problem, and it hadn't felt like assessment. It had felt like something simpler than either of those things, a recognition. Across a room full of people performing happiness. He had seen a woman performing composure, and he had known it from the inside, and he had stood up. Not because he was brave, not because he'd run some calculation and determined the expected value of approaching her. He'd stood up because not standing up had in that moment felt like the wrong use of whatever time he had left. "Avery," he said. "Yeah. I'm not good at this," he said. "I need you to know that I know that. I have a 6-year-old and a Navy career and a single-channel emotional range, and I eat the same breakfast every day because changing it creates a decision I don't want to make before 5 a.m. He paused. I am an objectively difficult person to build something with. She looked at him. Are you telling me this as a warning? I'm telling you this as information, he said, so that when I say what I'm about to say, you know I've accounted for all of those things. She waited. I want to keep building, he said. Whatever this is, I want to keep going. Not because I've run the scenarios. I've run the scenarios, they're all complicated, but because the thing I feel when you're at this table, at this balcony in my daughter's life. He stopped, got the words right. I don't want to be careful enough to lose it. Avery Lane looked at Nathan Cole for a long moment in the warm May night, with the city spread below them, and the two chairs side by side on the balcony of a house that had been a house of one for 3 years, and was becoming something else at a pace that honored what had been here before. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Simple. No architecture around it. No management. Just the true thing cleanly said. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. They sat there. The city kept moving. The port lights held. Somewhere a car turned a corner 2 blocks down, and its headlights swept across the buildings and were gone. He took Lily to put flowers on Claire's grave in June. He did it every year her birthday, June the 9th, a Saturday this year, and it was a system like his other systems, precise and maintained. He always brought sunflowers because Claire had thought roses at graves were a cliché she would have found annoying, and he always let Lily pick one from the bunch and place it herself. And Lily always did it with the serious reverence of someone who understood at whatever age-appropriate depth a child understands that this mattered. This year on the drive there, Lily was quiet for a while. Then she said, Can I ask Avery to come sometime? Not today. Just sometime. Nathan kept his eyes on the road. Why do you want to ask her that? Lily thought about it with the honest consideration she gave to things she wasn't sure about yet. Because I think Mama would want to know who's at our house, she said. And I think if Avery knew Mama was real and not just gone, she'd understand us better. He held the wheel, kept driving, breathed. That's a very thoughtful thing to say, he managed. I think about things, Lily said simply. He parked. They walked through the cemetery. Lily holding his hand the way she held it when she was being careful with something which was not her default mode, but which she could access when required. They stood at the headstone. He set the sunflowers in the holder. Lily placed hers, a single yellow one, with both hands leaning forward with total commitment the way she did everything. She stood back beside him. Hi, Mama, she said conversationally the way she always said it, as though Claire was simply in the next room and Lily was speaking through the wall. We're good. Dad ordered a second chair and Avery sits in it. I drew them in my school picture and my teacher put it by the window. She paused. Gerald needs his ear resewn. Dad said he'll do it this weekend. She glanced up at Nathan. Will you? Saturday, he said. Saturday. Lily relayed to the headstone as though providing an update. I think you'd like Avery. She asks real questions, not fake questions. She thought about this. She sat at Lily level when she looked at my drawing, not the grown-up crouch, actually Lily level. Nathan stood beside his daughter at his wife's grave in the Virginia June, and felt all 3 years of distance collapse and expand simultaneously. The grief still there would always be there, but running alongside something else now, something that wasn't replacement and wasn't forgetting, and wasn't the clean resolution that movies promised, but that real life delivered only in its more complicated form. The understanding that love was not a finite resource, that the heart's capacity was not a pie with fixed slices, that Claire's portion was permanent and intact, and that what was growing with Avery was not built on that portion, but beside it on new ground he'd been standing on for 3 years without knowing it could hold something. He reached down and took Lily's hand. She held it. They stood there for a while. The conversation happened on the balcony a Sunday evening in July, which had become their most reliable time. Sunday evenings after Lily was in bed, the long summer light finally giving up around 9 o'clock, the city settling into its nighttime frequency. Avery said, I want to tell you something, and I don't want you to respond right away. He said, Okay. She turned in the chair to face him fully. He turned in his. Their knees were close, but not quite touching. "I have spent a very long time," she said, "being someone who managed the way she appeared in the world. Being fine, being competent, being the woman who handles it." She looked at him steadily. "And I have not been that with you. I have been actually myself. The version that gets tired and scared and says the wrong thing sometimes, and needs to sit in a parking lot for 20 minutes to process a 6-year-old taking her hand." He waited. "And I needed to tell you," she said, that is the most significant thing anyone has done for me in longer than I can accurately measure. Not the dinners, not the calls, not any single thing." She steadied her voice. "The space. You made space for the real version. You didn't ask me to perform anything. And I don't know if you know how rare that is, or how much it cost me before, to be with someone where the performing was constant, and I couldn't see it until I was standing on the other side of it." "Avery," he started. "You said you'd wait," she said. He closed his mouth. "I'm not done," she said. She took a breath. "I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you since January, maybe before, and I've been waiting for the right moment to say it. And I've decided there is no right moment. There's just the moment where you say the true thing, because not saying it is worse than the risk of saying it." She held his eyes. "And I'm in love with Lily. Not as a package deal separately. Completely separately. She is her own magnificent, terrifying person, and I am in love with her independently of everything else." She stopped. "Okay, I'm done." Nathan Cole sat in his chair on his balcony in the July night and looked at Avery Lane, who was looking back at him with the expression of someone who had just put down something very heavy and was standing very straight in the aftermath of it. He had known. He had known the way you know things that are real, not with the sudden electric certainty of movies, but with the slow accumulating weight of evidence that eventually becomes impossible to account for any other way. He had known it in January and February and March. He had known it watching her crouch at Lily's level in the school hallway. He had known it the night she texted, "I'm sitting at my kitchen table," and he'd felt something in his chest, open like a door that had been stuck for 3 years and finally gave. He had known, and he had not said it first because he'd been not afraid exactly. Careful. Careful the way he was careful about the second chair. Careful the way he was careful about everything that mattered, treating it with the respect that important things deserved, not rushing the structure into place before the foundation was ready. The foundation was ready. It had been ready for a while. "I'm in love with you," he said. He said it the way he said things that were important, directly, without ornament, with the full weight of meaning that plain language could carry when the speaker actually meant it. "I have been for longer than I told myself, because I was accounting for every possible complication, and none of the accounting changed the answer." He paused. "The answer was always the same." She looked at him. "And I'm going to need you to know," he said, "that I don't say that lightly. I don't say it because the moment called for it, or because you said it first and the exchange required a response. I say it because it's the truest thing I know right now, and I've spent 3 years only operating inside true things, and this is the truest one." She reached across the space between the two chairs and put her hand on his. He turned his hand over and held hers. They sat like that in the July night. The city below them, the warm air moving through the space between the chairs, the port lights on somewhere, a ship moving slow and certain through dark water toward the place it was always going. "Lily's going to be insufferable about this," Avery said. "Lily has been insufferable about this since November," he said. "She's been waiting for us to catch up." Avery laughed, the full, caught-off-guard laugh that rang out into the summer night, and he heard it the way he'd been hearing it for months, the way it occupied space and made the space better for being in it. He thought about the alarm, 4:47, the black coffee, the single chair he'd sat in for 3 years, watching a city that never knew he was watching. He thought about the wedding invitation. He'd almost declined the room, he'd almost left the moment he'd almost stayed in his seat at table 7, and let the evening be exactly what he'd expected it to be. He thought about water finding the open path, how you could not force it, and could not stop it, and could only choose whether to resist it or to let it go where it was always going to go. He had resisted for 3 years, And then one night, in a room full of people who all had somewhere to put their hands, he had stood up. He had crossed a room. He had pulled out a chair next to a woman who was trying to disappear, and he had sat down, and he had asked her to dance, and she had said yes. And the rest of it, the coffee, and the phone calls, and the museum, and the balcony, and Lily's hand in hers, and 2 chairs, where there had been one, all of it, had followed from that single moment of choosing not to stay still. Not bravery, not a plan, just a man who was tired of resisting the current standing up in the only direction that felt like forward. He looked at Avery in the second chair, her hand in his. The city moving below them like it had always moved, patient and indifferent and beautiful. The same city it had been on all the nights he'd sat here alone, now carrying a different weight. The weight of something present rather than something absent. The weight of a life that was being lived rather than merely maintained. "Hey," she said. "Yeah," he said. "The alarm tomorrow," she said. 4:47. "Yeah." She squeezed his hand. "I'll be awake," she said. "I'm always awake before I need to be." He looked at her. "So am I," he said. And in that small exchange, no declaration, no ceremony. Just 2 people who both knew what it cost to lie awake in the dark, and had finally found someone else who understood the particular shape of that insomnia. Everything that needed to be said was said. Nathan Cole had spent 3 years building a life from the outside in. Systems routines, the careful architecture of a man who had decided that structure was the same as safety, and safety was the same as being okay. He had maintained it precisely, had lived inside it faithfully, and it had carried him through the worst of it, the way a vessel carries you through rough water, not because it's beautiful, but because it holds. But vessels are not the destination. The destination was this: a balcony in July, a second chair that was no longer empty, a daughter asleep inside, who had drawn 2 stick figures in the sun and put the picture by the window because the light was good, a woman beside him who had crossed 3 cities and 5 years of the wrong life to arrive at the right one. He had not planned for this. He had simply stopped resisting it, and in the end, in the deep, quiet, unambiguous end, that was the whole of it. That was the lesson that 3 years of survival, and 1 night at a wedding, and 1 dance with a woman who was trying to disappear had finally completely taught him. Love is not forced. It is not constructed. It is not the reward for perfect maintenance, or the outcome of the right system, or the prize for being careful enough for long enough. It is what happens when you stop blocking the path. It is what has always been moving toward you. Patient as water, certain as current, waiting only for the moment you finally step aside and let it arrive.